Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another podcast episode of Create Yourself Imagery, Intimacy, Innovation, a place where people from all walks of life and various backgrounds come to share their transformative personal and professional stories of restoration, confidence, clarity, justice, empowerment, education, and so much more. They are here to offer their helpful tools, resources, and affirming guidance. I'm Joyce Kiles, your global speaker, author, trainer, coach, and consultant. And if you are ready to transition, transform, and thrive, this is the podcast for you. As always, I'd like to welcome our new listeners. And of course, if you are a returning listener, welcome back. And as always, we encourage you to tell a friend to tell two more friends about joining in and listening in on the conversations. We always strive to bring you the very best in our guests who share all of their stories in terms of what it means to transition, transform, and thrive. And they do it in a way that is personable for them. And that is one of the things that I love so much about hosting this podcast. This week is no exception. As you all know, I always get excited when I'm introducing my guests because I thank them so much for taking the time out of their very busy schedules to do just that, show up and show out for us each and every week. And so this week is no exception. I have had the opportunity and pleasure of knowing this young lady for, oh my, I'm just thinking about it when we were talking about getting together, maybe 2 decades now or close to it. And she just continues to evolve in ways that continue to inspire me. And even with some of what we'll be talking about today, I'm always learning more and more wonderful things about her. So if you've clicked on, then you've already had an opportunity to read her bio. If you've not done so, I encourage you to make sure that you do when you finish listening to this podcast. She is just an amazing, amazing woman, personable, just a sweet, genuine, knowledgeable person. And I am so glad that she made time for us today. So, without further ado, let me present to some and introduce to others none other than systems engineer, author of The Collision, and creator of Koko and Friends, none other than Dr. Clara Denise West. Dr. West, welcome to the show today.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
Well, we are glad to have you on, and we're just going to jump right on in. So, as I've already shared with everyone, they're more than welcome to please. I encourage you to read her bio to learn more about her and how to connect. But I'm going to yield the floor to her for the next few minutes and, just kick us off, Dr. West, by sharing with us your create yourself journey. What brought you on this journey and, what made this the right path for you? So, for the next few minutes, the floor is all yours.
Okay. Well, in all honesty, my view of myself is first as a mother, and then everything else follows. What started me down the pathway that I'm on now to using engineering and life experience to try to get people to understand with more purpose and intent the course that God has them on, and that nothing really happens by accident. We may not understand why when we're going through it, but when we step back in time, which I've been able to do now, I see that God had a plan from the beginning. What started off my journey was my daughter, when she was an 8-year old, attempted suicide due to bullying. And suddenly my life took a turn career wise, personal wise. It turned my world upside down because I had no intentions, no foresight that I would be looking at a suicide with my baby, um, and especially an 8-year-old child. And it refocused everything because up until that point, I was focused on a career and trying to get to the next pinnacle and just wanting everything that opportunities were supposed to be available to me with my education and expertise. And suddenly it was a matter of life and death and an avoidable situation because children just don't treat each other correctly. I'd gone to her school administrators, and they were the philosophy kids will be kids and she needs to develop a thicker skin, and it was my problem instead of a problem that they wanted to address or even acknowledge, because it was a private church school, and that was not something that they wanted on the radar. So I had to find a way to help my child, find a way to save her life. And at the time, the doctors, you got a child who wants to take pills to go to sleep and not wake up, and the doctors want to give them more pills to be zombied out and not feel anything. And no, we're not doing that, because that's reinforcing a negative. So I just had to find a way myself of looking at her school situation as an engineering problem, and what happened to my child, that I put in a happy 8-year-old and I got out a suicide victim potentially, and what in that black box of the school system pushed her to the point where death was more important to her than life. And when I started looking at everything that was controllable, I realized as a parent there was really nothing that I could do to fix my child, because I'm sending her back into the same war zone every day. It's just like putting a Band-Aid on a soldier and giving him a gun and telling him to go back out in the field and fight. He's still bleeding from the last injuries. And when you talk to an 8-year-old, everything is today, yesterday, and tomorrow. So talking to her about something 5 years from now won't matter. She's 8. And she actually told me, Mama, I'm 8. I'm 8. And I'm thinking, she's right. I can't deal with this as a problem where she's outside of it. So I was driving one day, and we were going down the street and seeing people on the street, and we had these places where we would make up stories about how certain people ended up in the situations that they were in. And I realized she's really good at making up stories about people's lives. And so I just tried to find a way to get her to understand, or to talk to me, to tell me what she was feeling. But for an 8-year-old, expressing emotions and especially pain was something that she didn't even have a vocabulary for. So that didn't work. And so one day we were just sitting around, and she screamed about bugs. She hated bugs, and it hit me. I can use this bugs stories to get to her, because these are bugs that she hates, and she doesn't have a reason to hate, because she doesn't know anything about them. And I was able to tell her, well, look, you're judging these bugs without really getting to know anything about them. You don't have to like them. I'm not telling you have to like a bug, but you have to respect the fact that if they're here, they have a purpose, and they have a purpose that nobody can replace but them. There's a purpose for their existence, even in your environment. So I decided to take her to a bug museum in Decatur, Alabama, and we went through and we discussed, it was an extermination company had a bug museum. And so we went in, and she started reading about the bugs and realizing, oh, these bugs are interesting. And we were able to get her to respect them. She still didn't like them, but she at least acknowledged that they had a place and they had a purpose, and she had to respect the attributes that they had. So we were talking, and I realized that she was able to tell me about the bullied bugs and how they felt when the cute bugs and the elite bugs in the house would look down on them, because they were living under the water heater in the washroom, which is in our house was the place you just didn't want to go unless you had to. So we were able to come up with stories where she would tell me about how the bugs would feel, and I would be able to tell her as the adult how she could just tell the bugs, everything you're going through is only for today. Tomorrow is going to be different. Tomorrow the sun is going to come out, and we ended up making up a lot of stories of where the bugs had cousins, and the cousins were all residents under the water heater, and they encouraged each other. And so we were able to take the book stories, and a nephew said, well, if they don't play basketball, he wasn't going to read about them. So they all became basketball players and first cousins, because all of her uh, playmates that were family they were all first cousins. So it was an easy story for her to be able to identify with. And eventually all of my nieces and nephews got involved with character personalities that we incorporated into the characters in the books that we wrote. That's how Koko and Friends got started, and that was about 25 years ago. And this year, January the 1st, I was talking to a friend of mine about what we had gone through during the civil rights era when Martin Luther King was coming to Memphis, and the sanitation strike, and just different things that our parents had shielded us from, because we really didn't have any idea how bad discrimination was and about Jim Crow, because there was only so much that they allowed us to see. There were conversations that were had that we were not allowed to even be in the room with them when they were talking. And she made the friend of mine made the statement, we didn't document anything for our children, so they don't have a clue to what we went through or what our parents went through, because everything rested in our memories. And I one saying that a friend of mine had always made a statement about when we were talking about recording history, is that the biggest library is the cemetery, and it's a lot of unwritten books. So on the 1st of January, I started writing the book about really just growing up in Memphis during the era of Martin Luther King, and how church was so vital, and how my father was a pastor, and how the Black pastors got together, and there was so much fear from Henry Loeb and in Memphis with just the way that the society was run, where Black people didn't have a voice, and the church was the catalyst for everything in Memphis. So it was, and even with the churches, I'll be honest, there was the Baptist church, there was the Church of God in Christ, there was um, well, I guess you could say the elitist, kind of like the Catholic group. It wasn't very many of them, but there were, and these were all Black congregations. And when you start talking about sanitation workers, that crossed every church. It didn't matter what church you were in, somebody's family was impacted. And there was a lot of fear that went along with it, because we're not talking too many years after the Alabama church bombing, where those little girls were killed in Birmingham. And there was a lot of fear that whatever happened now, if they would take a church out, they would take anywhere out. So you had a lot of Black pastors who were fearful that whenever Dr. King came to a place, that something was going to happen if they were too visible. And so it got to the point of when the first march that he had, and the young Black man was killed in Memphis, that the Black pastors realized, hey, we got to do something, because this was a kid. This was a child 16 years old, who shouldn't be dead now. And he was killed by the police in Memphis. So we grew up really, really fast during the Martin Luther King assassination, because I mean, you probably weren't even born then, but there was a lot of rioting, there was a lot of fires. It was like the whole country was burning down. And the one woman who kept the whole country from really burning to the ground was Coretta Scott King. And she became uh, a very important role model by default in the lives of so many Black girls my age, because she was able to do what the men were not able to do. She was able to bring quiet. She was able to restore peace. She was able to let everybody else that was going through, because it was a lot of factions. There were the Panthers and a lot of militant Blacks who were ready to fight. And she bought calm because she lost everything. And she had no reason to say, hey, no, stop the violence. But she did. And she kept this country from being literally destroyed. In fact, today is her birthday. So I'm honored to even make this statement. So I became a product of everything that I experienced. I always said that our parents built a cocoon around us, but I was the butterfly who came out with burned wings because I was angry and I was disappointed and I was ready for a change. I was part of that Angela Davis resistance that, hey, I may not be able to change everything, but the things that I can change, I'm going to change. And so I took that philosophy in every aspect of my life. And even though Koko and Friends started earlier, the collision, I started writing that book on the 1st of January this year, and I finished it. In fact, I just released it on the 11th of April through Amazon, and it's available through bookstores. But the purpose of it is to, again, go back to the black box and understand what happened to me. I had 27 years, I had 5 degrees, I had subject matter experts in radar target identification and test and evaluation, field testing in different environments, and nothing was happening with my career. I couldn't advance. And when I did get the credentials that were required for the senior executive service positions, they changed the rules where now you didn't need a PhD to get it. So I looked around and the people that were being promoted were white men with master's degrees who had maybe equivalent experience, but they had been positioned for positions that were not intended for me to have. So I took the black box for everything that happened. And this happened in January. This is all new because I started looking at, after I was writing my story, looking at the patterns that emerged and realized this is the same pattern that had emerged when I was doing the Koko and Friends program for bullying. It was the same pattern, the same symptoms. Everything is the same. When you do the black box analysis, you look at the inputs, you look at the outputs, and you try to figure out what in the system caused the issues. And when it got through, everything was controlled by white supremacy, which is exactly what we're seeing now. And this is another aspect of it when it comes to Black women, because everybody, the only two groups of people who get to look at the picture full circle is the person at the very top and the person at the very bottom. The very top is the white male, the very bottom is the Black female. We see everything. Everybody else be beneath the white male is looking down on us, and we're looking up at everybody else. So you see it. You can't describe it per se because the system is designed to protect the white male, no matter what, no matter how incompetent he is, no matter how vulnerable he is, no matter how brilliant he is, the system is designed to protect him. And so that's what the collision is. And that's the message of the collision, is that the system is not going to really change. You have to approach everything as if you're playing chess. I didn't know how to play chess. I learned how to play checkers. So playing chess was a different game. And the Black Queen is the most powerful piece on the chessboard. We just do not realize our power. And the purpose of the collision is to discuss. It's basically a memoir of what I went through and what I learned. And as a test engineer, with 27 years of test engineering background, whenever we do a test program, we always set up the test procedures, the test plans, the requirements, the criteria for a pass or fail. And at the end of the test, we come out with the lessons learned, because you always learn something. There are some things that you don't discover until you're actually in a test environment. We always call them the unknown and the unknowable. But once you know them, you're obligated to put a record together, so whoever comes behind you with a similar test problem or a similar test program can see what you did. And either, because all lessons learned are not bad, some of them are good, but whatever you did that was good, that they could emulate it or improve it, and whatever was bad that was a waste of money, that they won't do it. So that's the story behind everything, is the mother. And I would say still the mother, because I became an engineer as a result of being a single mother and wanting to be able to take care of my son to a point where it would never feel like he missed anything materially. And engineering was a career field that afforded me an opportunity to make a good salary.
There are so many things that have come up for me as you were talking. First of all, thank you so much for your transparency and candor as you shared the different aspects of your life and how, honestly, how they all come together and they shape and continue to shape who you are, whose you are, and how you show up in the world personally and professionally. Like I said, so many different things that we could touch on, but I will not, for the sake of time, go through them all because you have expressed them so eloquently. Um, the I will start though with you speaking about your daughter, and I just want to continue to lift her up and to know that your story and what you shared, it resonates so much with me, and I know with those who are listening. One point that you lifted that I thought was really great is that your daughter said, "I'm eight," and she
Yes.
told you, "I'm eight." Um, I think that's profound because even at that age and recognizing, what was happening and the fact that she felt, you said, she felt like death was the better option. And how many of us over time, so many of us have thought that way or felt that way. Um, whether you're 8, 18, 28, 38, 58, because life, we deal with bullies. We do. We deal with bullies in our personal lives. We deal with them in our professional lives. There's what society tells us is beautiful and smart and articulate, who is the most, and how
Mhm.
we're supposed to look, how we're supposed to speak, how we're supposed to wear our hair, just those things. And when they show up with us as such, just such as babies, as your baby was, the fact that you saw, yeah, I'm putting a band-aid on this baby and putting her back out in the war field. I have a really good friend and colleague who shares, you use the band-aid analogy, and she often says putting band-aids on broken legs.
Mhm.
They just don't work. They just don't work. And so I love that you took her to a bug museum and that was a way of, you know, being able to have conversation with her, and the analogy around bugs and not understanding, who they are, what they are, and their purpose, but they do have a purpose. Even the bugs have a purpose. So I just love how you have put that together and that you've done it for so long. You got your family involved. These are all wonderful lessons that I'm really hopeful that the audience will take with them. So I'm just so appreciative that you shared that with us.
Okay.
And the other part that I wanted to talk a bit more about when you shared about the civil rights movement and the things that were going on in Memphis. And because my family, the family that I married into, was very much a part of the civil rights movement at that time as well. And you're right, I wasn't born when Dr. King was assassinated, but I was born shortly thereafter. So definitely, it still wasn't that long ago, even though it's been a while, but it's still not that long ago that the wounds are still fresh in a way
Yeah.
because of what you shared about this, the reason behind the collision and why you wrote it. It is so true that so many individuals are positioned for positions.
Hmm.
And there is a real truth behind us as women of color. Because, by this point, everybody should know I'm a woman of color. You just look at the flyer, you see my picture, it shows I'm the host. But I am most definitely one who identifies as a woman of color. That said, we as Black people and women of color, we still tend to have to work twice as hard and do twice as much and show up to be and have to fight, in some ways to be seen, to be heard, to be recognized. So what you've shared with the black box analysis, I hope that others will take in and, pick up the book, read it, share it with colleagues, and that it pushes some sense of curiosity and encourages conversation, true, genuine conversation around who we are in the society that we're in and the things that we're encountering, even in this space and time now.
Hmm. Well, I would also say, because I struggle personally with the label of people of color, because we're not. Black women are not people of color. For real, we are the bottom of the totem pole. And so when you see people of color, it's just like people saying, well, DEI higher and all of that. It's irritating because we didn't really benefit from it, not Black women. uh, so it's
Yeah, I
like
received that. I received
uh,
that.
so it's like we just need to be real with that. And if Black women don't stand up and support each other, we really didn't learn anything. And
Mm.
I've struggled a lot with the sister. No, I won't say that, but the sisterhood thing, I will say that, because we don't really, the sisterhood has to be taken in perspective of the racial hierarchy. And race only became an issue in the United States when slaves came in. It's the slave trade. So before then, it was, you know, I remember growing up when I was a little girl, there were these gypsies who would come through our neighborhood selling stuff off of the back of car, not cars, they were horse-drawn buggies, and the gypsies were looked down on as bad as we were. I'm just
Mm.
being for real. But you don't see no gypsies now. So they were able to assimilate. We never were. It doesn't matter where we go, our black skin is going to be obvious. Wherever we go, our hair is going to be obvious. Everybody's going to know when you walk into a room that a black person has entered the room. And it's sad when we get to the point where we think that we have overcome racism and, racial injustice, because we haven't, not as a nation. We just not there. Um, but black women, we have to speak from a point of clarity and look from a point of clarity, because you're not playing checkers, whether they told you or not. If you don't know how to think strategically, look at your position in terms of the organization, and make your moves from a position of clarity, then you will constantly try to figure out what's wrong with you and what can you fix about yourself to make yourself acceptable and presentable and make it work out for you. And it will not work out for you. You have to be able to look at the system and figure out for yourself what you're willing to accept. And sometimes you really just have to make a decision to leave. you know uh,
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just not going to ever change.
Right, right. And I was just going to say that, that as a black woman, there have been some situations, and I because I'm a coach, And I try to make sure that I am always using I statements as a coach, as a speaker. Um, I'm sure that there are some things that have been discussed in this conversation that Black women can relate to, but I will use the I statement here to say that I have certainly had experiences in work settings where the best thing for me to do was to leave.
Mm,
And, sometimes and that's happened to me a couple of times. And sometimes it's, at the hands of someone that doesn't look like me. And sometimes it's been, because of someone that does look like me.
yes,
So, to your point, there's a time and a way and a space in which we have to navigate and to pivot. And sometimes that means walking away. And it has been my experience in talking with other people that sometimes they felt that their leaving somehow, was a sign of weakness or giving up. And I strongly disagree with that. I think you have to know when to pivot and when to take care of yourself, your
yes,
physical and
yes,
mental and emotional self, and that there may still be a way for you to push back and to speak up and speak out, but you have to be strategic in
yes,
that. So as you said, this is chess, not checkers. So I encourage everyone that's listening, if you don't know how to play chess, even if it's not necessarily an interest to you, I think just studying chess and the pieces and
yes,
how each one moves, I think that's a relevant argument, if you will, to make, to just learn how to play chess, even if it's not for sport. Just understanding what the pieces are, and you will see where there's a lot of similarity in, who we are in those pieces, from the pawn all the way to the king and everyone in between.
amen. I will do an I. My position I found myself in was when I got my doctorate degree. All of a sudden, I became infamous on the arsenal. And I'm sitting up thinking, man, I am probably one of the most uh, non dangerous people you can run into. You know, I'm not a threat to anybody, but it was so strange the way that I was being treated and received. If in my book I go through a chapter on what happened at a Christmas party in '98, I will never forget that because the person who walked up to me was a white man who was being introduced to me, and I stuck my hand out to shake his hand, and he looked at my hand like it was poop in it. So I'm sitting up trying to figure out how do I deal with this. And he said, well, if you think I'm going to call you Dr. West, you were gravely mistaken and just tripping. And I'm sitting up, okay. In my first thought, well, okay, what did I do? And that's the first thing you're going to think is what did I do wrong? And so a couple of minutes later, he came back and he apologized and shook my hand. And I'm sitting up thinking, okay, what did I do right? Anyway, I'm just saying it to say you can't change certain things in the game because the game is already laid out before you. The reality is that what we're fighting against came from Europe before Europe came to the United States as colonies. The original, I can't say slaves, but original indentured servants were not black. They were white, but you can dress up an indentured servant and you can't tell the difference who's who. Uh, so when you get to the reality is there's this preservation of white male hierarchy that's inbred in every institution in the United States. It doesn't matter whether you're in the federal government, corporate America, academia, it's there. They're going to preserve the white male, and the white male can be incompetent. He can have 36 felonies against him. He can have filed bankruptcy 100 times. He can have rape charges all over the place, but they're going to protect him because he's that white male. And when he's no longer an asset, he's replaced with somebody almost just like him. So it's not a system of there's going to be a change. It kind of reminds me of, I'm sure you've seen hundreds and hundreds of times The Wizard of Oz. And when Dorothy goes behind the curtain, she realizes it's all just the facade, it's all an image. And that's what it is. It's all an image. And once you see behind the curtain and realize that these are policies, these are politicians, these are procedures, these are plans that have been infiltrated in every aspect of our society that are not going to change. People will be replaced, but the policies and the systems are going to stay intact to protect the white male. That's what everything is all about. And when you really understand that, you'll understand that that is the beast. That's the underbelly of the beast. And when you go into it, very few people come out. Very few people survive. But what you have to understand is that once you understand it, then you know how to move. You understand now that as a Black queen, you're playing checkers and chess and all the other chess pieces, the white chess pieces, and some of the Black chess pieces are going to do whatever they have to do to make sure that that white king is protected, that his position is protected. And they'll even shake the board to make you have to start over if you get too close to winning. So it's I hate to say it's a game, but it's a strategy. In my case, when everything came to a point of I wish I could leave, I couldn't. I had too much invested into the federal retirement system to just walk away after 20 years with nothing. And so I had to stay an extra 7 years so I could get my retirement and get my benefits and leave with something. But during that 7 years, I decided that, hey, we're going to play chess. We're going to all play. If you want to play this game, I'm going to come to checkmate as many times as I can possibly come to get into, knowing that you're going to shake the board and make me have to start over. But at least you will have to change the rules now, and you'll have to document everything the way I have to document everything. And so it gets to the point, for sanity's sake, sometimes you have to accept the fact that this isn't going to change anything, and I'm biding my time until I can leave. I have a niece. When I was writing the book in February, she worked in corporate America for a tech company, and she came to me with the very same situation that I did, where she was well, actually, they did a little worse with her. They wanted to put her on a performance improvement plan. This is a person who they had just given awards for outstanding performance, and she ran in the heads with one of the supervisors who wanted her to work outside of her area. Really, she's in finance and financial management, and they want her to make an engineering decision, which means that if the engineering decision goes wrong, she's going to take the fall for it, so she wouldn't make it. And so they wanted to put on a performance improvement plan, and I'm like, you've only been there for a few years, you have an option, you can leave, but orchestrate where you leave with what you want on your terms and not what they want. It just so happens that she's diabetic, and when they told her she had 24 hours to make up her mind, I'm like, no, you really don't. You can make up your mind, but right now you're starting to get really sick. You need to go to the hospital. You're sick. Document everything that you're going through, because she was under a lot of stress. Her sugars were shooting out of the chart. And when she called them back under ADA, which is American Disability Act, they have to accommodate you. So her 24 hours turned into 6 weeks. And so I'm like, now you're on the board. You can either decide how you want to play the game, whether you want to stay and hope that they will do the right thing, or whether you want to leave. In the meantime, the boss who tried to put on the PIP program, they got rid of him because he had written up in her performance appraisal something to the effect that she was coming out of a bag of tricks that he didn't know what to expect from her. And I'm like, okay, I've worked with the union. I was a union rep. I understand when you do performance appraisals, everything in that performance appraisal has to be repeatable. It has to be written in a form where you can put a numeric measure to it. How do you measure a bag of tricks? Is that 8 points, or is it 1 point, or is it 0 points? So I'm like, no, you got him. All you have to do is to write him up for gross incompetence, because you can't do that. If you can't measure it, you can't control it. You have to be able to document it. And so in my book, The Collision, I ended up writing 16 lessons learned, where I write it up the same way I would do a test report, where at the end there's the queen's rule of what the queen would tell you about that lesson. And one of the lessons is document, document, document. Documentation beats conversation in every situation. Another lesson is the value of silence. When you don't speak, people never know what you're doing. So you value your silence to the point of where everything becomes a point of recognizance. And when you can go out and be quiet, that means you're hearing twice as much as you're saying. And you can find a lot out by just being quiet. You can look around and find out who the big players are, because the big players typically are not the loud ones. They're the ones who don't say anything and let everybody else speak for them. So there's a lot of wisdom in the book that I learned as a result of looking back over it over these first 40 days of the year, because I didn't really understand until I started writing things down. Oh, so this was what that was doing as part of the pattern. And once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. Once you see the system, the system really is not that intimidating, because then you know where you stand on the board and you know how to maneuver. But until you understand that this is this system has been around for at least since 1776, before that actually, because they came over with colonial England. Uh, and it's not going to, it would take the United States being totally undone and rebuilt for things to change.
Oh, Dr. West, you have shared so many wonderful gems. Thank you for your wisdom, your knowledge, for sharing and for, putting some things in perspective, giving my listeners an opportunity to explore your world for a bit. And what I know to be true is that from each episode that I have hosted online here, someone has always reached back to me and said, you know what, your guest so and so shared this perspective. This is something that I'm dealing with right now. This is something that someone close to me is dealing with, and this was very timely. So that being said, I want to say that the same, I'm sure, is true for you and all that you've shared. Someone will come back to me and say, you know what, as a Black woman, I am experiencing this, I am seeing this, or I have gone through it, or like what you shared about, your niece and her experiences. Hey, someone that I am close to, that I care about, is experiencing what you've shared, and you gave some well documented tips on what it means to document, to keep up with everything, to know your rights, to speak up, to speak out, when to do so, how to be strategic with it all. So you have shared so much, and the pieces that you shared about Koko and Friends and how that got started, I know that there is someone listening who is experiencing or has experienced that, themselves or with their child, or it may be them as an adult, experiencing bullying in the workplace, or bullying in a relationship, or bullying where, yeah, they need to know and understand, how do I deal with these bugs? How do I navigate this system and know that even the bugs have a purpose, but understanding what that purpose is and turning it into power, which is what you have done. The one thing is we're closing out that I know to be so, because I have followed you for so many years, is the work that you have done with Coco and Friends, in addition to what you're doing now. But Coco and Friends has been recognized around the globe. And I personally felt the need to make sure that we did not close this podcast without lifting up all of the wonderful work that you have done, that it is being acknowledged around the world. So Thank you so very much for what you do. My last question to you is if you have just a last word or nugget, a sentence or two to give to our listening audience, and the best ways for people to connect with you. The list is there right under our flyer. But if there is a particular way that you prefer people to connect with you, by all means, please share.
Um, I'm available over email just about any time. The one thing that I would say is trust God. At the end of the day, my sanity and everything that I am, everything that I've accomplished is because of Him. And He's my foundation. He's everything.
I think that's a wonderful way to close out our time together today. So, on behalf of Joyce Kyle's Consulting, the podcast of Create Yourself, and just all of our listeners, I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to be our guest today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
And to my listening audience, thank you for tuning in today because you know that I could not host this podcast without you. So until next time, go forward and create the life you desire and deserve. And remember that you can do so at any age. Let's continue to transition, transform, and thrive together.